It's time for more of today's top stories from the Next News Network.
Officer Jason Paul Jones of the Mount Pleasant, Tennessee Police Department has been arrested and charged with statutory rape by an authority figure for allegedly seducing a 16-year-old boy. Jones is a 2-year veteran of the department who was most recently assigned to a K-9 unit. Jones became the target of an investigation following a complaint that there may have been sexual contact between the officer and the teenage boy. Investigators say there is no evidence that the contact was non-consensual, but under state law it would constitute aggravated statutory rape because Jones is an adult who is considered an authority figure. He was released on a $75,000 bail and has been put on unpaid administrative leave by the department. If convicted, Jones faces a prison term of 3 to 15 years in prison without the possibility of probation or parole and a fine of up to $10,000.
Despite a budget sequester agreement that is reportedly imposing austerity measures on federal agencies, the State Department found more than $700,000 in its operating budget for landscaping services at the official residence of the U.S. ambassador to Belgium. The contract was announced about a week and a half after the budget sequester went into effect. CNS News points out that a few days earlier, Secretary of State John Kerry had claimed that the sequester could, quote, seriously impair our ability to execute our vital missions of national security, diplomacy and development. Among the dire consequences predicted by Kerry were cuts to humanitarian programs and aid to Israel.
The seizure of private bank accounts is not the only confiscation of wealth taking place as part of the bank bailout in Cyprus. Reuters reports that Cypriot officials have agreed to sell roughly $523 million in gold from its national reserves as part of the bailout package. This would amount to roughly 10 tons out of the estimated 14 tons in its total reserves. The announcement of the sell-off caused the already stricken Cypriot economy to take another severe nosedive and sent world gold prices sharply down. The deal involving the sell-off was spelled out in an official financial assessment produced by the European Commission. The plan also calls for the closure of Laiki Bank and what is called a deposit for equity swap, that is, the seizure of uninsured deposits at the Bank of Cyprus.
Seeking to expose offshore tax havens used by Canadian citizens to protect their assets, the Canadian government has promised to crack down on so-called tax cheats. The Conservative government of Stephen Harper has announced increases to the budget of the Canada Revenue Agency, that country's equivalent to the IRS, and established an anonymous tip line. These measures are regarded as inadequate by the country's Liberal Party, which is demanding a more aggressive approach. There's some irony, therefore, in the fact that one of the first so-called tax cheats exposed in a report published by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists is prominent Canadian attorney Tony Merchant, whose wife is Liberal Party Senator Pana Merchant. The ICIJ report reveals that Mr. Merchant, a former member of the Saskatchewan Legislative Assembly, has stored $1.7 million in a trust fund set up in the Cook Islands.
You're watching the Next News Network.